Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing Fun and Fancy Free.
And before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen to us.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, and you could read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. Remember, that's where every day, rain or shine, insanity or otherwise, I'm posting a new entry in the Walt Disney Animation Studios 64C bracket. You get to vote on those again. I'll tell you, there have been some very unexpected successes. The day we're recording this on Martin Luther King Day, January 19th. Earlier today, we had to say goodbye to the film you and I talked about last time, Encanto. Could not fend off the advances of Alice in Wonderland. I am realizing some people younger than us, younger than my generation, they have nostalgia for some movies that I don't get, but whatever. Anyway, if you're not following me on Blue Sky, you're doing it wrong. So make sure to check me out there and email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. All right, now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's start talking about the songs of Fun and Fancy Free. This is, of course, the 1947 animated feature from Walt Disney Studios, featuring the voices of Walt Disney himself, Pinto Colvig, Clarence Nash, Dinah Shore is in this movie, and of course, who else would be better than Edgar Bergen, a.k.a. guy who looked a lot like Kelsey Grammer in the mid-1940s, according to me right now. So this is a movie that I should note, fittingly, considering that Fun and Fancy Free is a movie that has two different halves. We don't have a guest this week. It's just the two of us talking about the songs of this movie. And if you haven't seen Fun and Fancy Free in a while, I will at least clarify this. There are a lot of songs in this movie. There are, including reprises, 11 different songs in this movie. And, I think it's going to be interesting for us to figure out which of them is best and if being the best song in this movie means it's actually very good. That's the interesting thing, too, about this, because we've already talked about at least a couple of package films on this show. We've talked about the songs of Saludos Amigos and The Three Caballeros. We talked about those songs with Monica Castillo. We talked about Make Mine Music with Keith Phipps back in the summer of 2025. Were we ever so young? But now we have Fun and Fancy Free, which is when we get to the era of the package, of the miniature era of the package film, where the package does not have a lot of options. There's just two stories in this movie. There is the first half, which is Bongo, based on a story by Sinclair Elmer Gantry Lewis, as I wrote him in my notes. I was like, wait a second. Upton Sinclair did The Jungle, but I know Sinclair Lewis did some very non-family friendly stories, and Elmer Gantry, that sure counts as not family friendly, but it's an excellent film if you haven't seen Elmer Gantry, the adaptation with Burt Lancaster. But anyway, so Fun and Fancy Free, we start with Bongo, and then the second half is an adaptation of one of the most iconic fairy tales of all time. That story is Jack and the Beanstalk. Here, it's Mickey and the Beanstalk, and also Donald and Goofy for good measure. Now, first of all, I know we always like to start these off. You and I were both not even thoughts in the heads of our parents. Neither of my parents was alive when this movie came out, for example. But do you have any recollection of seeing, if not this overall movie before, one of the halves of this film before? When you were
funny you should phrase it in that way, because upon watching this, I realized I have never seen Bongo before. I never made an active effort, and certainly, in the era when Disney was theatrically releasing their features in the 1980s and 70s and even into the early 90s, they were not doing these movies. Instead, they were breaking them up in pieces. And Mickey and the Beanstalk, for example, was, I know, attached to Dumbo for at least one of its re-releases.
Mm-hmm.
So not only did I not have any recollection of Bongo, and I knew that I had not seen it before, I had a very different memory of Mickey and the Beanstalk, because the version that I saw did not have Edgar Bergen's and Charlie McCarthy doing the narration. It was Sterling Holloway doing the narration.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. So there is a version of Mickey and the Beanstalk, which is probably the much better known version, the one that was broadcast on Wonderful World of Disney at various times over the years, or Disneyland, depending on the year. And the version that was released theatrically with Dumbo as part of that package was Sterling Holloway. So, and a much more tolerable version, because I know from a lot of anecdotal sources that, Edgar Bergen was huge. He was a massive, massive celebrity. And of course, as there's a joke I always remember from, dare I say the name, Woody Allen's Radio Days, where they're listening to the Edgar Bergen show on the radio, and the kid is going, "He's a ventriloquist on the radio. I don't understand." And how does a ventriloquist on the radio make any sense at all? It's like, well, it makes more sense than watching him in person, because he's a bad ventriloquist. Let all that aside. Yeah, so my only real familiarity with this, and I remember every bit of, I've seen Mickey and the Beanstalk several times, and I couldn't, if you said, hum me the fee fi fo fum, and of course knowing that the eating song is to, funiculi funicula, that's not really hard to know the tune to. So all of that is familiar. Not a single bit of Bongo was anything I'd ever seen before.
Interesting. And by the way, do you know what else I find very interesting? So answering my own question, I would imagine I saw Mickey and the Beanstalk when I was a little boy who wanted to be a big boy, because it was, as you said, it was on a version of the Dumbo re-release in the 1980s. It was on a few different VHS copies. I want to note, though, it's not just that Sterling Holloway was a narrator on Mickey and the Beanstalk. There's a different version, apparently, in which Ludwig von Drake is the narrator, which is maybe I'm looking at it right now. That may be a version that I saw, because that appeared on the Walt Disney Anthology series in the mid 1960s. And then that was released on VHS as part of the Walt Disney Mini Classics line. And then the mid 90s as part of the Disney Favorite Stories collection, before they decided to go for, metallic or like metallurgic objects like diamonds and platinum, and they went
Yes.
Disney Favorite Stories. What an amazing title that is. So I think it's interesting that there are these different versions. Also, apparently there is a third version that aired in the mid 1970s when you were growing up, a version on the Disney TV show The Mouse Factory, and this version starred Sherry Lewis and Lamb Chop. Kids, you should Google Sherry Lewis, because that's a whole story.
Every era has its celebrity ventriloquist, and so I guess we won't get to the Waylon Flowers and Madam version of this story.
I think you finally lost me. I don't get that reference at all.
Really? But Waylon Flowers and Madam were on The Muppet Show. Really?
Waylon Flowers sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay. Wow.
Sorry, I'm bumming you out here. The point is there are obviously a lot of different versions of Mickey and the Beanstalk that have existed. Now, Bongo, the internet tells me, was released as part of that Walt Disney Mini Classics line on VHS in the late 1980s. But by that point, you were in your early 20s, I'm guessing, or late teens, and obviously this movie would not have been high on your list of to-dos, I'm sure. I think I can safely assume that.
Sure, that's fair. That's fair.
It's just, and so when I saw Bongo before, because obviously you've just answered a question I could have asked, which is, did we talk about this on the old show together? And clearly the answer is no, because I think I safely will say there's one specific song in Bongo I don't think you would have forgotten if you'd seen it before.
No, I would not have.
Can I tell you the best part? Scott knows exactly which song I'm talking about.
Clearly.
But anyway, so, and the other thing we should talk, the setup really for both, it's funny because because I watched this movie again yesterday before prepping for this episode, and I had thought incorrectly that the entire movie has the Edgar Bergen frame story, shall we say. The frame story in which Edgar Bergen, famous ventriloquist who I know for two reasons. One, he has a cameo in the Muppet movie, and two, he is Candice Bergen's father. Those are the two things that really, in my head, are most applicable. I will echo something you said. I want to echo something you said, and I'm very glad you said it first. Edgar Bergen, not good at ventriloquism. Because I put in my notes as like, I can see your lips moving, man. And it's funny because I know when I was a kid, I saw Radio Days. I wonder if that was the character Seth Green played.
Yes.
It was? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, so the frame story doesn't actually start with Edgar Bergen. It starts primarily just with Jiminy Cricket, voiced as he was in Pinocchio by Cliff Edwards. And Jiminy Cricket is a character we should note who back in that mid to late 1940s and into the 1950s, during the early era of the Disney anthology series, Jiminy Cricket was probably close to Tinkerbell in that he was used often as this Disney icon, like this Disney mascot or figure who would show up, maybe not as the star, but if you, Scott, I'm sure knows this. If you're a Disney theme park fan and you know the music, there's an old album that you can find online if you ever want to listen to it, where Jiminy Cricket is touring Disneyland. So you get to hear him commenting on the different rides and lands at Disneyland in the late 1950s. And similarly here, Jiminy Cricket is primarily just in the beginning, but he does show up in the other setup piece. There's a little bit of live action and animation blending, but at the start, he's wandering around this empty house, just an empty old house, and he sings. He sings. Technically, he sings one song. He's credited for the first two, but the title song, "Fun and Fancy Free," to my awareness, pretty much plays only over the opening credits of this movie. And I would not have spotted Cliff Edwards' voice orally, at least. I don't know if you did when you were watching the film.
No.
It didn't sound him, but. We talked about the opening song for Make My Music with Keith Phipps back in the summer of 2025. This song to me is very similar in that it sets the tone. It is fine to listen to in the moment. And you were saying earlier, you could hum Fee Fi Fo Fum. You knew the Funiculi Funicula from Eat Until I Die. I saw this movie yesterday, gun to my head, couldn't hum a single bar of this song.
No. And I mean, and I think, to be fair to my recollection of being able to hum those other songs, it's because I'd seen it many other times. And so it wasn't the first exposure. But that said, there's actually maybe at least one of these where I probably could do the tune with the first time. Yeah. And, we've talked in some of the other episodes about the package films and some of the others of this era about a particular song style and a vocal style that just doesn't work for me. And that is this. It is that sort of choral voice performance. And it's just, it's kind of grating to me. And this is not an interesting enough tune in order to get past those things. I continue to say this is a me problem. It is, I know plenty of folks who are perfectly fine with this kind of thing, but it's like getting into the, the choral version of Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. It's like, just shut it off already. I've had enough with these people. And apparently the Starlighters were quite a thing. They got, A-list talent and to do this, but it's just not the kind of song that I'm interested in. It's like, I would be immediately skipping to the next track on a CD version of this.
I don't even know that I'd skip to the next track, but it's like, yeah, okay, that's the credits. The credits are over. Let's get to the actual movie, because that's all that I'm thinking about. And I'll say, I know I mentioned this kind of thing on the old show, especially with the earlier Disney films where it was, for whatever reason, it can be difficult for me to not be like, oh, this movie is 73 minutes long, as is the case with this specific film, and thinking, okay, how far into the movie are we already? Oh, that's a lot less time than I thought had surpassed. So, the setup with Jiminy Cricket only takes a handful of minutes, but all I kept thinking was, there's two different stories here, and I know there's the Edgar Bergen stuff. It feels like we should be diving right into Bongo, and we aren't, because after Fun and Fancy Free, we do see Jiminy Cricket wandering around this house and singing the next song in the film, I'm a Happy-Go-Lucky Fellow, which, according to the behind the scenes of the movie, was actually written for and cut from Pinocchio. One of the writers of the song, Ned Washington, won or shared the Oscar for When You Wish Upon a Star when that film was released in 1940. So it obviously tracks that this song could have also been originally marked for Pinocchio. And first of all, I don't know if you when did you watch this movie relative to when we're recording this, Scott?
What was it, Saturday, Friday or Saturday? So few days. It's been a few
Okay.
days.
So again, I watched it yesterday, and it's a very interesting song in terms of the lyrics and in terms of what is happening on screen as Jiminy Cricket is singing this laid back, tossed off song. He's looking at all sorts of different horrifying news headlines and how, you worry too much. In fact, everyone worries too much. And in case you're wondering, that is a direct quote from the movie. And I just thought, well, that's a choice. Now, obviously, this movie was made nearly 80 years ago. It's weird to watch that scene in the specific context we live in right now. Right now, here in January 2026, it's still just January. I don't know how that's possible. It feels like at least a year has taken place in the last 3 weeks. But the point is, first of all, I think that they made the right call cutting this song from Pinocchio, partly because Jiminy Cricket is a fascinating supporting character, but I don't know that we need a song that kind of explains his whole mentality. He already cuts a happy-go-lucky figure without having to spell it out in that specific movie. But in the same way, while this is bouncy, it's laid back, it doesn't take too much time. It also, just in general, feels like, I get it. I know he's happy-go-lucky. Like, he's happy-go-lucky. I know that because he's just wandered into somebody's house and they don't even seem to live there. And all these horrifying titles. The one that I liked of the books that he walked by, Misery for the Masses. Who doesn't love that famous old book, Misery for the Masses?
Which I'm sure was a 1947 bestseller, that one of the Reader's Digest condensed books or something like that.
And again, I was thinking to myself, leaving aside the context in which I and you are watching this movie, I was like, okay, this movie came out 2 years after World War II. This was it was after the Pacific Theater had ended as well. It's like, okay, we're trying to, as Disney as a company, trying to push forward that 50s era version of America that is held up by some people as being this quintessential, iconic version of America. Don't you miss the way the country was back then? And this song is a choice, and I'm not sure I like it.
Well, I think what's interesting is that it feels somewhat redundant, given that the first song is a, hey, let's all just lighten up and have a good time. It's another, hey, let's lighten up and have a good time song in its immediate wake, which it feels like it would have been just as easy to have a immediate reprise / sung by Cliff Edwards verse of the same song. And that's kind of what it's like. I like listening to Cliff Edwards sing. You talked about some of the other ways in which Jiminy Cricket had been used throughout the era. And because I grew up in the 70s, but also with parents who grew up in the early Mickey Mouse Club era, there were times when the original, like the original Mickey Mouse Club episodes were rebroadcast on syndication, and I actually watched some of those things, and among those things were the I'm no fool, no siree.
Yep.
So you get those little helpful, Jiminy Cricket is teaching you how to be a good person and not play with fire, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I have a very nostalgic sense of that voice and that character. Again, he's a very innocuous, it's not like it's Jiminy Cricket has a ton of personality, but it's the same way that Mickey does. He just sort of serves this function, and I like listening to Cliff Edwards. I just kept wondering, why not do just another verse of Fun and Fancy Free instead of an additional song?
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, that unfortunately is not what we get. But after that song and a little bit of, wandering around and, a little bit of yada yada, shall we say, to the audience, Jiminy Cricket finds this record called Bongo, a musical story performed by the singer Dinah Shore. He puts it on the record player, and then we actually transition to the first half of our package film. And again, this is based on a story called Little Bear Bongo by Sinclair Lewis. It is not surprising to me to learn that originally, both of the halves of this movie were designed to be full-length features. And Bongo specifically was initially thought of as potentially a sequel of sorts to Dumbo, since Bongo, like Dumbo, is a circus animal. And like Dumbo, Bongo doesn't exactly love working in the circus. He is a star when he is in front of an audience, but he is treated poorly off stage. And more importantly, Bongo can't help but be drawn to the call of the wild. And finally, one day he takes his chance. He gets out of the circus train. He is in the middle of the wilderness. And while he's, there's the basic story is that he falls in love. There is a love triangle of sorts. But even before he meets a female bear named Lulubelle, he is enjoying his newfound freedom. Dinah Shore, I should note, narrates the entire story. Neither Bongo nor Lulubelle nor the very large brown bear who attempts to get involved, the bear named Lumpjaw, who get involved to take Lulubelle as his own. They don't talk. Excuse me. They don't talk. So we get Dinah Shore, who has a very lovely voice, as is evidenced by the next song, which I should note, it takes what feels like a while to get to the next song, which is okay. But it does take a little while to get to the next song, which is my pick for the best song in the movie. And that would be Lazy Countryside. Now, the song very much falls in with that title. It is a slower paced song. Dinah Shore is doing a little bit more of a lower key as she sings. The basic idea, though, is that Bongo he's finally free. He's away from the circus. He is enjoying himself. The song itself has just a very nice, seductive, not in a romantic way, but just kind of it basically creates that call of the wild in a very effective way, I thought. I will clarify, I don't know that Lazy Countryside is a great song, but it is easily my favorite song of the 11 songs in this movie. That may be a hot take for you, considering that you're more familiar with the songs from Mickey and the Beanstalk, but what did you think of Lazy Countryside?
It's the best of the Bongo songs for sure. And I think that, I again, maybe it's just the nostalgia talking, but I do like, at least one of the songs from Mickey and the Beanstalk a little bit more. But it's a nice song. Again, much better when it's actually just Dinah Shore singing than when we get the choral portion of that song from
the Dinning Sisters.
The Dinning Sisters.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a nice piece. There's not quite enough going on visually for me to, so this is interesting when we talk about the next song. It's like if animation as sort of inventive and creative as was going on in the next song was paired with this song, I would think I would like it even more because I don't like the next song, but I like the animation to it. So I think there's part of that going on, which is like I would listen to this again, but I wouldn't watch the segment in which it was involved again.
That's, yeah, I can see that. I mean, again, it's one of I remember it's not just back in the pre-COVID days, like almost a decade ago, I did this insanely long ranking of every Disney song. And I just remember like this one, again, this is a movie with a lot of songs in it. And again, you take it away from the visuals and it's like, yeah, this is a very, very nice song. And it's one of those songs where you think, I get why you had Dinah Shore do the narration for the movie as well, because she has a very pleasant voice to listen to. And, I think it speaks as well to that next song. Again, after a little bit of exploration, Bongo eventually encounters Lulubelle. He immediately falls in love, and we see this love ballad. That is visualized again. There's some pretty clever dream sequence kind of stuff here with the song Too Good to Be True, but as you just alluded, Scott, it seems more like Too Bad to Be True.
It's not a good. I mean, again, there are certain stylistic things, and this is not, in terms of the vocal, it is strictly a Dinah Shore performance, so there's not that. But I have this feeling when we, with something like When This Is Love, these syrupy 1940s, 50s love ballads just do absolutely nothing for me. There's nothing lyrically interesting about them. It's all about these sort of sweeping string arrangements and, but again, I like watching it because that sort of, for those who have not seen it, it's sort of basically in the clouds and we see them sort of tumbling through and having various adventures with the weird physics of being on clouds and in clouds and around clouds, and it's fun to watch, and I just would like to mute it and watch the animation and not have to listen to this song while it's going on.
Yeah, and it's fine. I think part of it for me is the visuals are very clever. It's that maybe because it's a shorter story, maybe because we don't hear any of them talk, I don't really feel a love connection between Bongo and Lulu-Belle.
That's definitely part of it, is that it doesn't connect in any way to, I mean, obviously some of the greatest of the love ballads in the Disney song, they come later after there's been sort of a relationship established of some kind, so that we can actually see what's going on between them. And so that's not this at all.
And by the way, I hate to be pedantic and nitpicky. Did I hear you call it When This Is Love earlier? No,
you may have, but If This Is Love, yes.
It's So This Is Love, not If This Is Love. Scott, come on.
Sure.
And you know that I like that song more than you do, but yes. It definitely does qualify as the syrupy song, and this very much is that. So as mentioned, though, after this song, Bongo and Lulu-Belle, they both feel the same connection to each other, even if we, the audience, do not automatically feel the same. But as mentioned, there is a third bear. There is a third part of this triangle, and that is a very large bear named Lumpjaw, who is outrageously large compared to Bongo, even with his little unicycle. And Lumpjaw wants Lulu-Belle for his own, and more importantly, Lumpjaw thinks Lulu-Belle is into him, and you might be wondering, how is that possible? Well, obviously, it's because she slaps him in the face. And that is because, while in the world of Monty Python they may slap each other with fish, in the world of Bongo, when bears slap each other, apparently it is perceived as a sign of affection, as we hear in what is absolutely the most baffling song in this movie, possibly one of the most baffling songs in Disney animation. It is called, fittingly, Say It With a Slap. Now, I alluded to it earlier, as I'm sure you know, Scott. You had never seen this before. What did you make of Say It With a Slap?
All right, so I'm going to defend the concept in a broad sense, and here's what I mean by that. I like the idea that we are trying to establish how out of touch Bongo is with the world of wild bears. He does not understand their ways. He does not understand their customs. And so all of these, the things that they do when you're not a bear who has been raised in captivity or lived in captivity. So it's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. But this particular idea, I mean, is there literally nothing else they could have come up with to suggest here's a kind of funny, I mean, now, I also understand that a lot of this is sort of cultural changes. I don't know that we consider it funny to say, hey, walk up to a woman and slap her and she's going to find that really appealing. So there's that part of it that certainly has not aged well. But I also just wonder, could there not have been something else a little bit? I mean, I have to assume it's just the slapstick component of it. It's very Three Stooges. It's like, hey, people getting slapped and knocked around. That's kids are going to laugh, and they probably will, and they will not think about anything deeper than that. But it's like it's an interesting concept. What is also interesting to me about this song, I will touch on briefly, is as looking for cover versions of this, one of the few that actually has one.
Huh. Okay, then.
So that's a thing. So anyway, yes, it's lively. The performance of it as well, but it is weird. It is just weird.
Yes, it is an immensely, immensely weird song. And yes, the cultural differences and changes in the last 8 decades is part of it. I just think it's weird to begin with. I see what you're saying in terms of the idea of let's show how Bongo is slow to pick things up, but also I don't think most bears or people would be like, oh, that's why you guys are slapping each other. Obviously, that makes sense. But after Bongo realizes, A, what Lulu Bell's slap actually meant versus what Lumpjaw took it to mean, they have a fight. The two of them challenge each other, and it's not the first fight between animals in a Disney movie. It's not the first fight that ends with the bad guy plunging off of something, especially a waterfall. I think about the Fox and the Hound. I think about the big fight in Bambi between Bambi and Rano in terms of two animals of the same kind vying for a woman's affections and doing so physically. But this one is obviously not remotely as intense. Lumpjaw is swept away. He doesn't actually die, I don't think. And then Bongo and Lulu Bell, they live happily ever after. And the story ends with a brief reprise of Too Good to Be True as that story wraps. And again, it's fine. It's okay. I do want to note that Elliot Daniel, who co-wrote a few of the songs in Bongo, do you know what Elliot Daniel's most famous claim to fame is musically, Scott?
I only because I looked up all the composers at various, looking at this to see.
Well,
see if
that's
they did
cheating. That's cheating.
But I was curious because these are not some of the,
Right.
there are those composers who have been like, oh, I know this from this Disney song or from this park song or something. So I was like,
Right.
What else would I know this? So yes, I looked up Elliot Daniel and I saw that he composed the theme song to I Love Lucy.
He did indeed. Yes. But so after this song, we go back to Jiminy Cricket. He decides, he doesn't decide. He sees an invitation. He sees an invitation for the house across the street. So I guess, by the way, that means the house that he's in currently is Edgar Bergen's house. Because there's nobody else at the party.
There's nobody else at the party. It's very sad. This little girl is not having a happy day, I think.
I'm sorry, Scott, are you implying that any little girl, by the way, Luana Patton, who would have been age 9 when this movie came out, what 9-year-old girl doesn't want to have a nighttime birthday party with an older man and nobody else?
And a bunch of dummies sitting around staring at her.
Uh-huh. Well, now, come on. They're not all dummies. Charlie McCarthy sure seems smart. No, kidding. The point, so, Luana Patton, who people may remember from the following year's package film Melody Time and the previous year's Disney movie Song of the South. Yes, that's her. Luana Patton shows up and she is getting entertained by Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, Mortimer Snerd, who is, again, I guess, a character who was pretty popular back in the day. This is one of those things where, again, I know, like, Jim Henson idolized Edgar Bergen. Speaking of people who are on The Muppet Show, I know Edgar Bergen, I believe, was a host, was a guest on an early episode of The Muppet Show before he passed. But it's one of those things where I just think, I guess I had to be there. I guess in the 1940s, you had to be there and you had to accept that this is what we did for entertainment before we had that box that showed stories on the TV. Because I think there's a lot of business with them. So Jiminy Cricket sees this invitation to the party. He goes to the house and correct me if I'm wrong, he joins the festivities and we basically never hear from him again in the entire movie.
Until the very, very end, because he's not part of the Mickey and the Beanstalk film, but it's like when they actually return to the house and we get our little coda with the giant ripping the roof off.
Yes. But yeah, so it's mostly we give things over to Edgar Bergen, and again, I don't get it. It's not even that, I don't know that I mind ventriloquism automatically. It doesn't help that when I think of modern ventriloquists, all I think of is Jeff Dunham.
Yeah.
Which is not helping the craft of ventriloquism out, whatever that craft is. But anyway, eventually, after a whole lot of nonsense, Edgar Bergen tells the story, The Legend of Happy Valley, a.k.a. Jack and the Beanstalk, featuring Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and El Gaucho Goofy himself, El Gufo. And I should note, similar to how Bongo was originally going to be a feature film, the same was true of Mickey and the Beanstalk, because as anybody who knows Fantasia and its production may know, by the late 1930s and the early 1940s, Mickey Mouse may be a familiar character, but he was not nearly as popular as other animated characters like Donald or Goofy. And things like The Sorcerer's Apprentice and The Brave Little Tailor existed to kind of boost Mickey's popularity. The idea of Jack and the Beanstalk being a feature film was pitched to Disney during the production of Fantasia, Mickey Mouse would serve as the Jack character. Donald and Goofy would be supporting characters. Disney liked it a lot. They greenlit the story. They started developing the movie, and it was late in October of 1941 by the time of the Disney animators strike having gone forward, that being a big deal. World War II, even before Pearl Harbor, World War II was making it harder for a business like Disney to actually make money overseas, so they put it on hold. They eventually brought it back as part of this package thing later in the 40s. I think it's interesting, by the way, to note, I was looking this up. Apparently, there was a period where Disney had said they should pair Mickey and the Beanstalk with The Wind and the Willows, which, of course, would eventually become part of the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. My favorite is that, according to the internet, which, as we know, is never wrong, the title would have tentatively been Two Fabulous Characters. And when I'm going to reference Steve Martin in Fantasia 2000, I think we're all glad that they stuck with Fun and Fancy Free and the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, because Two Fabulous Characters not only would have been inaccurate, since there are three fabulous characters in this story itself. I don't know why we're giving Donald and Goofy the cold shoulder here. And I should also note the other interesting thing about this part of the movie, even if it doesn't actually factor in with the songs, is that Disney himself still provided the voice of Mickey Mouse in this movie. This was really, outside of him showing up on the Mickey Mouse Club, this was the last time Mickey provided the voice of that character. So, all that said, I do think it's interesting to note, you may have felt the same way this time, if not previous viewings, there are 5 songs in this half of the movie, including the reprise of Fun and Fancy Free, which occurs during the bit with the giant pulling the roof off of Edgar Bergen, or off of Luana Patton's house, I guess. But only one of the songs features Donald and Goofy singing. Mickey doesn't sing at all. And I should Eat Until I Die is a very short song relative to even the other relatively short songs here. So in fact, the first song we get comes before we meet Mickey and Donald and Goofy. It's back when Happy Valley is indeed a very happy valley with a wonderful castle in the center and the golden harp that is eventually stolen by Willie the Giant, voiced here by Anita Gordon, sings the song My, What a Happy Day. And I would say this is maybe second in my book in terms of best quote-unquote songs of the movie, both because it is a very fast-paced, bouncy number, and Anita Gordon, like Dinah Shore, has a very nice, pleasant voice to listen to. But what did you think of My, What a Happy Day?
Yes, and this is the one that I would rank slightly above your preferred choice of Lazy Countryside. And
okay,
the way I know that this song is working for me, because it does include one of those choral verse breaks, and it didn't really bother me. So the fact that we had, and I can, again, this is not, going into it, I certainly would have said, I know the Fee Fi Fo Fum, that's easy one I remember, and I know the Eat Until I Die. But I don't think I would have remembered this. And as soon as it started, I was on board, and I remembered the and it just has one of those structures that is immediately like, that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to tell you that this is a happy place, and it is a good song on its own. It is a song that serves its function. Again, not necessarily a lot going on visually at the time that this is, it's really, again, it's a table setter, it's a place setter. But I really just enjoy listening to it. And again, it's like, even when it's not just Anita Gordon singing, it's like, I still kind of like this song. So that's how I know it's working for me.
I mean, she has, similar to Dinah Shore, she has a nice voice to listen to. It helps that, and so I should note, it helps that 2 of these songs in this story, because there's, again, really only 4, like there's 5 songs in the second half of the movie, but only 4 of them are within this story, and 2 of them are performed by Anita Gordon, which is helpful. But it's also interesting that for a story that you would think focuses on Jack, or the Jack equivalent, and his friends, they don't have as much to do musically. Because after My, What a Happy Day, things get very unhappy because, again, Willie the Giant steals the golden harp. Happy Valley becomes very unpleasant, falls into disarray, and that includes poor farmers like Mickey and Donald and Goofy, who, like, one of the images I've always remembered from this half of the movie is the cutting the sliver of bread.
Yes.
And handing those little slivers of a slice of bread into each of them to eat. Donald going mad with hunger, eating the plates and forks, or trying to. And then Mickey says, you know what, I'm going to sell our cow. We're going to go out, sell the cow, see what we can get. And while he is off selling the cow, Donald and Goofy imagine what riches they will fall into, what amount of food they're going to have, and that leads to Eat Until I Die. Again, Pinto Colvig and Clarence Nash, the original voices of Goofy and Donald, they sing the song. As noted earlier, it is to the tune of Funiculi Funicula, which, if you don't know that name off the top of your head, I promise you've heard it before. It is one of those pieces of music that is just unavoidable. I'm looking at it right now. It's been in everything from a video game called Pizza Tower to, apparently, I know I've seen this movie. I don't remember Rodney Dangerfield singing a version of this in Easy Money back in the 1980s, but apparently he did. And I think there's also a version of it if you go to Radiator Springs Racers, depending on which version of the ride you're on. I think Tony Shalhoub and the guy playing the other Italian car sing something like this, if not in the ride in the queue, right? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. It is one of the songs that is performed on the, in the regular non-holiday version of it.
Right. Gotcha. So, I mean, all that aside, again, knowing that the music is eminently familiar, any thoughts on, again, the very brief Eat Until I Die?
I mean, again, it's one of those things that it's lodged into my head, as especially the Pinto Colvig pronunciation of sweet potato pie. So I could do every lyric from it if I wanted to. If that was one of those gun to my head, sing a song from this, like I could give you the turkey lobster. Yeah. So it again, very short, but it's very funny in the time that it's there, and it has a useful purpose in establishing, this is what they're dreaming of, and then what they're disappointed by when Mickey arrives. So it's perfectly. It's the exact right thing for that moment. Doesn't really need to be longer. I'm fine with it.
Yes. Again, it does not overstay its welcome. And as Scott just alluded, after the song is over, Mickey comes back and says, look, we sold the cow and I got magic beans instead. And I will tell you, one of the interesting choices, since this is a shorter version of the story, is that Mickey just leaves and one day he's back, I got some beans. And it's like, cool, where'd you get them from? Who gave you these magic beans, Mickey? Nobody asks those questions because, of course, Donald and Goofy are just infuriated, specifically Donald, at the fact that Mickey traded these cows for some magic beans. But as anybody who knows the story of Jack and the Beanstalk knows, while Donald, serving, I guess, as the equivalent of the mom in this case, throws the beans into the floor, they do turn into a massive, gigantic beanstalk that lifts up the house to the sky. There is a whole section of visual gags where you're seeing the three of them asleep, not realizing, hey, we're hundreds upon hundreds of feet in the sky. They eventually
great stuff.
Oh yeah, yes, good bits. Yes. There are a lot of good bits here. It's just, sadly, they're not musical bits. But yes, I do agree. And then they wake up in the land of the giants, where Willie lives, where he has stolen the golden harp, who, of course, wants to go back to Happy Valley. And that leads, once Willie shows up, voiced, I want to note, by Billy Gilbert, who you may not know his name, but Billy Gilbert had quite a career. So for Disney purposes, he voiced Sneezy in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But he is also in two of the most iconic 1940 comedies, specifically movies from 1940. When you were doing all your looking stuff up, did you see what movies he was in 1940, or do you know those offhand?
No, I don't. I knew the Sneezy, but I didn't know that. I don't know anything else about him, really.
So he is in His Girl Friday, and he also plays the Minister of War in The Great Dictator.
Oh.
So he had quite a 1940. And again, I'm looking at his career. He was in a lot of Laurel and Hardy shorts in the early 1930s. He is in A Night at the Opera. He is in Broadway Melody of 1938. I want to make sure I give this guy his props here, because again, there were a lot of different titles. And this came at the later part of his career. He's in Anchors Away in 1945. He's in quite a few. And he sings Fee Fi Fo Fum here, while, mostly singing it to himself, to the audience that Mickey and Donald and Goofy are trying to hide. He is revealing that while Willie may seem like a dummy, he is able to turn invisible He's able to shapeshift. He can fly. What do you think of Fee Fi Fo Fum?
I mean, very much like the "Eat Until I Die." It's a song that I know very well, and I could, do the "Fifi." I don't know no Fifi, and all of these things are just imprinted in my brain. And so, while it's very similarly also a very short song, exactly what, a verse and a half, effectively, it's one that gives a nice little character to the giant and kind of a, his dim-wittedness, or that's a great voice. Whether he's dim-witted or not, he's got the great dim-wit voice.
Yes.
And so it's, there's a lot that's, conveyed in a fairly condensed amount of time. So it's fun. I remember it. I could hum it from memory immediately, and that's all I got to say.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good version of a song that like establishes that he's the villain, but not in a overly terrifying way. It's kind of creepy, but also kind of funny. I will admit, because I'm not as familiar with Mickey and the Beanstalk, perhaps from when I was a kid, I first associate Willie the Giant with playing the Ghost of Christmas Present in the 1983 short Mickey's Christmas Carol, when he was, of course, voiced by a different actor. Billy Gilbert, had passed away by that time. But no, it's a funny little song. After this song, there's, a good amount of business of Mickey and Donald and Goofy trying to avoid getting caught by Willie. He catches them. He puts them in the harp's chest. Mickey is able to escape and then work with the golden harp to free themselves, escape the giant. And during this is when we have the last song that occurs within this specific story, and that would be My Favorite Dream, which is partly meant as a lullaby to get Willie to fall asleep. And also by the end of it, and this is the part that I always remember, is the golden harp literally telling Mickey what to do and where to find the key.
Yes.
Which again is clever because she's singing it in the same scansion and time and rhythm as the rest of the song. But if Willie was awake, he'd be like, wait a second, why are you telling somebody about where the key is? It's, again, a cute song. And again, it helps that Anita Gordon has a very charming voice to listen to. Any thoughts from you on My Favorite Dream?
Yeah, I mean, it does have that kind of amusing quality to it when it becomes sort of, a diegetic song about, what's going on, even though it's this very, low-key song while there's this very kind of frantic action playing out as it's happening, which is really one of the few times that happens in this. Usually the sort of slow and lilting songs are accompanying slow and low-key, lower energy images. And so, I mean, it works in its very curious way for that reason, I think, is that because we're trying to get the giant to fall asleep, and yet there's all this, business happening around that's very, very manic. And I like the song, and I like the fact that it goes in that sort of I'm telling you what's going on in the lyrics direction. And yeah, I mean, I like all of the original songs in this, and it's probably just because I know them and I know it well enough to have associations with them that are quite fond.
Sure. Well, and it helps, I think, also that unlike Bongo, even if you don't know the story of Mickey and the Beanstalk, pretty much anybody watching this knows the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it's a classic for a reason. So after this song, Willie, of course, does wake up, but after they have broken the golden harp out, there is a chase down the Beanstalk. They cut the Beanstalk. Willie dies, presumably, but not really. And Mickey and Donald and Goofy live happily ever after. The harp is back in Happy Valley. But again, just as we go back to Edgar Bergen's house, because we couldn't possibly end the movie without that, Edgar Bergen is telling one of his characters, Mortimer Snerd, don't worry, Willie's not real until, oops, the giant appears. He is looking for Mickey. Jiminy Cricket heads out of the house as Willie continues his search through Hollywood. And we get that very brief reprise of Fun and Fancy Free at the end, which is about as forgettable and not bad, but just, it's there and then it's gone and you forget that it happened. Pretty much. Now, I should note, when this movie came out in theaters, it was, I would say it arrived with mediocre reviews. There were some slightly positive reviews. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who, if you know your history and film critics well, Bosley Crowther can be positive about a lot of stuff that he maybe shouldn't have been. He gave it a pass. There were some critics who criticized it for being dull, which I can't entirely argue, especially in the first half, and that it's not even an issue of mixing animation and live action. It happens so infrequently here that you almost wonder why they even tried to do that. Because outside of the very end with Willie, which obviously does mix animation and live action, the stuff with Jiminy Cricket it's almost blink and you miss it that he's there in Edgar Bergen's house, I would say. And I should also note that while the movie did okay at the box office, it did not receive any Academy Award nominations. I do just want to acknowledge, because it'll tie back to two different things I mentioned here. The Oscars that were held in 1948 to honor the films of 1947, that category, Best Original Song, did go to a Disney song, Scott.
Yes, it did.
It went to
Zippity, already mentioned.
Yeah, Zippity Doo-Dah from Song of the South. But my favorite part is that the following year, I was looking this up, the Academy Award for Best Original Song went to a song that I associate with Frasier, speaking of Kelsey Grammer, and that song would be Buttons and Bows. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Frasier, Google Kelsey Grammer, Buttons and Bows. It is genuinely one of the funniest scenes in that show. Him failing to sing Buttons and Bows. It's a really funny moment. But you mentioned, by the way, earlier, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about Encanto covers last time, but you said there is at least a cover of Say It With a Slap? Really?
Okay, so, I mean, I think one of the things that you discover as you look for some of these things is certainly what has had a cultural footprint, obviously long enough. And there's not a single recording of this song that I was able to find. And now this is obviously aside from people who may do their own little YouTube channels or things like that. Those things are probably out there somewhere. But in terms of an actual recording, I was not able to find evidence of any recording after the year 1947 in which this was released. So there's things where, Disney has his tie-ins with things and they are able to do this. So there were two other recorded versions of Say It With a Slap, both with very strong Disney connections.
Okay.
One of them by the Louis Prima Orchestra, with vocals by Louis Prima, and the other by the Phil Harris Orchestra with vocals by Phil Harris. So you can hear both King Louis and Baloo sing Say It With a Slap.
That's really funny. And that, by the way, that ties in nicely to something I'll be promoting here at the end of the episode. Not because of Say It With a Slap, but because something I wrote invokes both of those actors. That's a fun little tie. So then no other covers you found, I'm guessing, because
there was nothing else was, other than what could have very easily been the versions that were for a sort of tie-in album that were by, other sort of orchestras and with in some cases, the identical performers, but there does not appear to have been any other recordings made of these songs after 1947.
That is so wild, especially since we're thinking about Phil Harris and Louis Prima decades before either of them would be so clearly associated with Disney, with Disney animation. That's a funny little tie-in. I mean, yeah, and I would also call out, so unlike when we talked about Make Mine Music back in the summer, Fun and Fancy Free is on Disney+. It was released on Blu-ray about a decade ago with the aforementioned Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So if you want to just pick and choose what you watch, it's very easy to do so. Yeah, I don't think I had anything else, though, for Fun and Fancy Free, Scott, unless you wanted to talk about something.
Not really. I do find it, I think one of the things that we tend to associate with most of the Disney animated features is that there is a songwriter, or at most a couple of songwriters. And so there is some sort of stylistic consistency, even if they may be very different, structurally or in any other way. We have a movie here where there are 7, 8 different, credited composers for the songs. And I do think that results in something that feels everything is not of a piece. So I think that's something that's a unique component to some of these that is just, it's hard to get around.
That is true. And you know what? You mentioned different composers. There is actually one thing I wanted to acknowledge that we haven't talked about, which is that the two Anita Gordon songs in Fun and Fancy Free were co-written by Bill Walsh. And if you know that name, that's because he co-wrote Mary Poppins in the 1960s. He ended up becoming more of a live-action writer, co-writer. He wrote The Shaggy Dog, The Absent-Minded Professor, The Misadventures of Merlin Jones, which is still one of the great titles in Disney history. So it's interesting to think of how, he started with composing and he very quickly moved up the ranks, a lot of live action presence on TV and film. So interesting little tie-in. But no, aside from that, I think we can wrap it up. So why don't you take us out, Scott?
So with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? From 2002, The Country Bears.
Oh boy.
We will have conversations, I'm sure that it will be lively. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts.
I'm just thinking to myself, we were talking just now about the different performers and composers and musicians, and we're going to have that conversation next time too, I think. I'm reminding myself some of the writers of those songs, and there are quite a lot. Anyway, we, of course, would love for all of you out there to listen along. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Fun and Fancy Free? Really? You love them? I'd love to know why you love them. I don't even know if you could hate them, but maybe you do. Maybe you have any comments, questions, opinions. You can always share those with me. Reach me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. And as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, you can also find me at outlets like Crooked Marquee, so this episode is going to be going up on January 26th, which is one day after the 65th anniversary of a movie we have not yet talked about on this show that we will at some point, but I don't know if we're going to do it all by itself because the movie I'm talking about has only 3 songs, and that film is 101 Dalmatians, which turns 65 on January 25th. So I wrote a piece about specifically the film's use of xerography, and I ended up referencing movies like The Jungle Book and Robin Hood, featuring voices like Phil Harris and Louis Prima. So take a look at that. If it's not up by the time you're hearing this, it should be up very soon after. So keep an eye out on Blue Sky. I will post all about that. And Scott, where can our listeners find you online since it's going to be the middle of Sundance? You're at the dance.
It is. When this goes up, I will be in the middle of what is likely to be my last Sundance as it exits Utah and the Salt Lake City area. So yeah, you'll be able to find all of my coverage for the Sundance Film Festival features at cityweekly.net. You can also find me and my updates on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw, and I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.